You are now listening to Black Coffee, Crime, and Crochet, a true crime podcast where cozy meets criminal, hosted by Jasmine C.L. Prince. Grab your yarn, pour up an iced coffee, let's sift through the chaos.
Hey y'all, and welcome back to another episode of Black Coffee, Crime, and Crochet, the true crime podcast where cozy meets criminal. I'm your host, Jasmine C.L. Prince, and if you're new here, welcome to the BC3 crew, and to my OGs, y'all, welcome back. Around here, we talk money, hustle, systems, and survival with just the right amount of shade and side-eye. Today, we are diving into the murky waters of CPNs, those so-called, they have a lot of different names, credit privacy number, I'm drawing a blank, but we'll get into all the different names that they go by. But they made their way from the scammy corners of the internet all the way into the medical field. And I'm talking about Medicaid fraud. Yes, Medicaid. So let's get into it. You ever scroll past those reels promising you can get approved for a car, an apartment, even government benefits with something called the CPN? Sounds like a cheat code, right? But what if I told you that behind the flashy TikToks and sketchy Telegram channels lies a growing web of fraud, especially targeting programs like Medicaid, or I should say, including programs like Medicaid, but targeting people with really bad credit? Today, we're untangling the real story behind CPNs, how they started, why they're illegal, and how they're being used to game the system until the feds come knocking. One thing I really want to stress on this podcast, again, I am not any type of financial advisor, financial expert, nothing like that. This is all for educational and entertainment purposes only. So anything I say on here should not be taken like as anything other than what it is. I want to make sure I say that. Next thing I want to say, y'all are going to see or not going to see, y'all have probably seen a lot of TikToks talking about how CPNs are legal and, rich white people have been doing it for so long. They only started locking people up when Black people started using them and things like that. We're going to get into what it really is. Okay, but before we get into everything, y'all know how we have to do. So, the iced coffee recipe. Today's brew is a little unexpected, a little extra, but just stick with me. Brown sugar, cinnamon, iced, shaken espresso. So, it's common, but it's really good. 2 shots of espresso or half cup of strong brew coffee, 1 tablespoon brown sugar, a 1/4 teaspoon ground cinnamon, or if you have the Torani brown sugar cinnamon syrup, that works too. Half cup of oat milk or your milk of choice, and ice. So how I've been learning to do it is you want to combine your hot espresso, your brown sugar, your cinnamon, make sure that's all dissolved. Then you want to add that to a cup or a shaker with your milk, shake it all together vigorously, and then pour that over your ice because you want to have your coffee all mixed together so that the flavors are balanced throughout the whole drink and not like latte or not coffee at the top, milk at the bottom or something like that. I've also seen where I think it's called tumble it, where you pour, well, that's basically tumbling it because you're shaking it in a jar and then pouring it into your drink. So yeah, there's that. You can also top it with cold foam if you want and a dash of cinnamon, but really simple, really common, brown sugar, cinnamon, ice, shaken espresso. Then for the crochet update, I am so excited. I'm getting even closer to finishing my husband's sweater. The sleeves, of course, are going to take the longest. I've done all the granny squares, the whole back, and the sleeves just seem like they will not move. So that's the last thing to do. It's just both his sleeves. But I also finished a cowl cowl scarf. I will post a completed project for that as well as the link for the pattern that I bought to make it on Instagram. So if you're not following me on Instagram, possibly TikTok and Facebook, just follow me everywhere and then you'll be able to see what it looks like. So that is that. Okay, enough of the pre-gaming. Let's get into this story. So we're going to talk about our, I guess, players or the persons involved. And then again, I'm going to go into CPNs and all of that, why they're illegal, all that type of stuff. So I'm anticipating this might be a longer than usual episode, but promise y'all just stick with me considering this is the beginning of the year and we're seeing a lot of fix my credit and taxes and all that type of stuff. I really wanted to make sure y'all are informed. So let's start with the Medicaid CPN fraud scheme. Sean DeAndre Franklin, 48, is a former North Carolina resident who once ran a mental health and substance abuse treatment facility serving Medicaid patients. He owned and operated Wayne County Day Treatment, a provider of day treatment services for children and adolescents in Goldsboro, North Carolina. In that role, Franklin was an approved Medicaid service provider, which gave him access to sensitive personal information of his clients. By all accounts, Franklin had no high-profile prior criminal record or a notable public profile before the fraud. He was known in the community primarily for his role in behavioral health services. Franklin's educational background is not widely documented. I wasn't able to find a lot in any available, at least publicly available sources, but his position as an operator of a treatment center suggests he was a trusted professional in the healthcare community. He was involved in local healthcare and social services through his clinic, helping at-risk youth overcome mental health and substance issues. This community trust would later be gravely violated by the fraud he orchestrated using patient data. By 2021, Franklin had relocated to Georgia, but his fraudulent activities centered on North Carolina, where he had built both his legitimate career and the illicit scheme. Here is how now we're going to get into the fraud. Franklin was identified as the mastermind of a multi-year credit fraud operation referred to here as the Medicaid CPN ring. CPN stands for Credit Privacy Number, but people also refer to it as Credit Profile Number, which is a 9-digit number formatted like a Social Security number that fraudsters use to create synthetic identities. Franklin's scheme combined traditional synthetic identity fraud with outright identity theft of real individuals, notably Medicaid recipients under his care, to defraud banks and lenders. Here's where we're going to get into CPNs and all that type of stuff. Again, I'm sure y'all have seen this all over TikTok, and the people who are the ones who are selling CPNs are all in the comments like, oh, CPNs aren't illegal. It depends on how you use it. Here's my caveat. The only real reason you would purchase a CPN is to apply for something you would not get approved for if you use your real Social Security number, which in essence is fraud because you're lying. You're providing false documents or false information on legal documents. You cannot do that. That's what makes CPNs illegal. If you want to have one just to have one, I mean, why would you pay thousands of dollars for a number that you're not going to use? If you're using it for anything, if you're using it to get an apartment, if you're using it to get a credit card, if you're using it to get a car, it's illegal. It's fraud because they're trying to defraud or trick people who wouldn't give it to you because your real credit is trash. If they ask for your Social Security number, you have to give your Social Security number. You cannot give a CPN. Okay. So, synthetic identities and CPNs. According to court documents, Franklin began exploiting synthetic identities as early as 2012. So CPNs also are not new. He would couple his real name and birth date with a fabricated 9-digit number resembling a Social Security number to spawn a new credit profile, essentially creating a CPN for himself. Let me also interject here. You will also see all over TikTok people saying, oh, well, if the CPN is a made up number and it's not linked to someone else, you're not stealing identities, then it's legal. It's not legal because it's not your social security number. It's not administered by the Social Security Office. It's not administered by any government entity. So it's illegal. Even if you use your name, your birth date, but you use this made up number, it's still illegal. For the people who also steal identities, then you have, not only do you have the CPN fraud, but you also have identity theft. So you can have CPN fraud without identity theft, and you can have both of them. So I think I'm getting ahead of myself, but here we go. These fake identities had no legitimate credit history, so Franklin essentially built their credit worthiness by piggybacking them on real credit accounts. In practice, he added the CPN identities as authorized users on credit cards of individuals with strong credit, illegal, by, quote, renting these trade lines. The synthetic profile's credit score improved, fooling lenders into seeing the CPN as a real person with good credit. This tactic of seasoning a synthetic credit file with positive trade lines gave the illusion that the CPN holder could manage debt responsibly. In reality, it was a scam. The entire purpose was to obtain credit under false pretenses. Even if your intention is to pay it back, you still got it under false pretenses. But with him in particular, it was to obtain under false pretenses and then also never repay it. So again, a credit privacy number, CPN, or credit profile number is a 9-digit identifier that replicates the format of a social security number but lacks any legitimate government authorization. These numbers are vicariously referred to in the shadow economy as credit profile numbers, credit protection numbers, or consumer protection numbers. While legitimate identification numbers such as the Social Security number, individual taxpayer identification number, ITIN, and employer identification number, we also know as EIN, are issued by federal agencies like the Social Security Administration and the IRS, the CPN is exclusively a product of the private fraudulent market. The people who sell them, they don't have the authority to do that. The primary functional utility, or the main reason that people get a CPN, or the main use of CPNs for fraudsters or a desperate consumer, is the ability to separate an individual's financial activity from their actual credit history. You cannot do that. When an individual with a history of defaults, bankruptcies, or high debt to income ratios applies for credit using a CPN, the credit bureau's matching algorithms often fail because it's a computer to link the new application to the user's real Social Security. This effectively creates a ghost profile, which is like a clean slate that allows you to get a high limit credit card, auto loan, housing that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get, or you'd be ineligible for because your credit is bad. So again, false pretenses. So the origin of these numbers in itself is almost universally criminal. Investigations by the Social Security Administration's office and the Inspector General, or of the Inspector General and the FBI, revealed that the majority of CPNs sold on the open market are not merely random sequences, but are in fact stolen Social Security numbers. So there's a way to get stolen Social Security numbers, but there's also a way to randomly generate numbers. Either way, they're both illegal. So here are some ways that people get these CPNs. I'm saying CPN numbers. The N means numbers, so CPNs. Scammers prioritize the acquisition of Social Security numbers that are unlikely to have an active credit profile associated with them. So this dormancy is critical to the success of the fraud because it prevents the immediate triggering of fraud alerts. Because if someone was trying to use mine, I would be like, hey, wait, that's not me. Versus if nobody's using the number, then they're less likely to be monitoring it and keeping up with it. So the fraud would not be quickly identified. The second pool includes social security numbers of incarcerated individuals. Prisoners often, don't engage in consumer credit market for extended periods, making their identifiers ideal for hijacking. Oh, also for the other one, uh, for the dormant identifiers, those are usually children or elderly people, which is terrible because they're super vulnerable. And then the third pool targets. Oh no, I'm sorry. So the first one is children because, they're not 18 yet. They're not using them. Second one is incarcerated people. The third one is elderly and the deceased. So senior citizens, particularly those who have transitioned to permanent care facilities, may no longer monitor their credit, while the identifiers of deceased individuals can be exploited during the window between their death and the formal updating in the Social Security Administration's death master file. So there's like a small window of opportunity where they can go in and exploit it, and usually they do that. Then we have the random generator. So beyond direct theft, which is the first one that I just said, the targeting of dormant identifiers, that's identity theft. Then you have the generation of random numbers, which is where people are like, well, if you do it this way and you link it to your name, then it's not illegal. It still is. Some criminal organizations utilize algorithmic generators to produce 9-digit sequences that comply with Social Security Administration's formatting rules. These organizations then use illegal online validators to cross-reference these numbers against existing databases to ensure that they have not yet been flagged as active. This process is the foundation of the synthetic identity theft, where a criminal combines these fabricated numbers with real, stolen, or entirely fake names and databases to manufacture a persona that exists only in digital records. This is where we debunk where people say, oh, it's legal. A defining characteristic of the CPN fraud industry is its resilience or reliance on a misinterpreted legal narrative designed to provide consumers with a false sense of security. Scammers frequently cite the Privacy Act of 1974 as the legal authority that permits individuals to use a CPN instead of a social security number. The Privacy Act, specifically Section 7, was intended to limit the ability of government agencies to deny services to individuals who refuse to provide their Social Security number unless such disclosure is required by federal law. However, this statute is almost entirely irrelevant to the world of private consumer credit. So the Privacy Act defense is a hallmark. It's basically like the sovereign citizen style of law, where scammers use to exploit the public's general lack of familiarity with the nuances of law. Y'all see how oh, I'm not driving, I'm traveling. It's that type of, you still can't do it. So let's get into marketing and how CPNs have just blown up. And then we're going to get back into the CPN or the Medicaid fraud. I just really want y'all to understand that CPNs are illegal. The distribution of CPNs is supported by an aggressive and increasingly visible marketing ecosystem that operates on mainstream platforms like TikTok, Instagram, Telegram, social media, all of these. That's just where it's blown up because these credit repair specialists, I'm using quotes, leverage the fraud economy, which is a term used by investigators to describe how social media has turned criminal scams into consumable content. They love making content out of it. For instance, I believe her name was Tashiana. She had this whole thing about a CPN where she used it to get an apartment, and then the apartment complex found out, and they told her she had to come back in to the office. And so she calls the guy she bought the CPN from, and he was like, what you calling me for? And she documented this whole thing. It turns out it was all fake. It was content. People ate it up. It was all over TikTok, and then we found out that it wasn't real. People love making content out of this. But then there are people who are also doing it. They're the ones pushing it like, oh, this is how you do it, X, Y, and Z. If someone tells you it's illegal, it's just because they did it wrong. No, it's just not. I know I think I'm talking faster than usual just because it's just so egregious, the amount of people I saw on TikTok trying to make CPNs okay. And then there's people in the comments saying, well, I used it and I've been in my place for 8 years. You just didn't get caught. That is just because you didn't get caught doesn't mean that it's not illegal. Okay. Influencers often display stacks of cash, luxury vehicles, or high-limit credit cards, attributing their success to the use of a CPN. These marketers use phrases like erase your past, legal credit repair, and the new credit identity to sanitize the nature of the transaction. I also want to say CPNs and those who are marketing themselves as credit repair people, in my eyes, go hand in hand. Because there was a TikTok I saw of a young lady. She's driving and she says she has a client who gave her permission to share the story, which we don't even know if it's a real story, if she's just making it up. But she says she has a client who gave her permission to share the story where she just got out of jail and she had used a CPN to get an apartment, and the apartment complex found out and called the police, and she got arrested and had just gotten out of jail, and they had given her 30 days to be out of the apartment. And she said she didn't know it was illegal because she used all of her identifiers, her name, her birthday, all of her information, just with a different number that wasn't her social security number, because she said, oh, and I've, been following you for a while and I wanted to use you, but I was told that getting a CPN was the faster way. So I did that and I should have just used you all along. And she's like, well, because I can get she said, I can get things removed off your credit in 30 to 45 days, and now I have to rush the process to send these letters out for her, this, and the third. You don't need to do that. Also, if somebody says they can have something removed from your credit in 30 to 45 days and it's a legitimate debt that you owe, that is a scam. They can remove it so it can be seen, but if you owe the debt, you owe the debt. It may be, like I said, it may be removed for people to see it, but if they really go into and look at your stuff, they still know that you owe the student loans. They still know that you have the medical debt. They still know that you have the evictions. It's all public record. Don't pay somebody to remove something from your credit that you legitimately owe. Just call the debtors, call the creditors yourself, make arrangements, pay your bills, fix your credit on your own, send your own dispute letters. You can do it by yourself rather than paying people all of this money for them to lie to you. Please don't do that. If somebody says they can have it deleted and you actually owe it, it's the same as somebody trying to sell you a CPN. I know, y'all. I'm really, whew. It really bugs me when people try to scam, but then try to make it seem like, oh, they're scamming, but I'm not scamming, when all of y'all scamming. Okay, let me calm down and get back to my notes. So there was some more that I wanted to say, but y'all might have to catch me on TikTok and I'll just talk just about CPNs. Yeah, I think I'll do that. If you're not following me on TikTok, this might be my first content that I actually post of my face and me saying something on TikTok, just the rest of what I have to say about CPNs, because I want to get into this Medicaid fraud case. So let's get back to that. The scheme earned its Medicaid CPN moniker because Franklin drew on information from actual Medicaid beneficiaries to bolster his fraud. Investigators found that between 2016 and 2018, Franklin illicitly used the real names and social security numbers of 10 North Carolina Medicaid recipients to open credit cards, take out personal loans, and even finance vehicles. Absolutely diabolical. Put him underneath the jail. These 10 individuals were clients who had received services at Franklin's treatment center, meaning he had access to their confidential data through his role as a Medicaid provider. So in other words, Franklin turned patient records into ammunition for fraud. Importantly, the Medicaid program itself was not financially harmed because no false Medicaid claims were filed in the scheme, but Medicaid recipients were the unwitting identity victims. Franklin went so far as to obtain fictitious North Carolina driver's licenses in the names of those real people with Franklin's own photograph superimposed. So, armed with these fake IDs, he could then pose as the identity theft victims when applying for credit. Here is one really egregious example. And I want y'all to just be prepared for this. Franklin rented an apartment in Raleigh under the name of one stolen identity. His co-conspirator, Anthony Maryland, then lived in that apartment, essentially under a stolen persona. By blending real stolen Social Security numbers, which passed credit bureau validity checks, with fake personal details and documents, the scheme's synthetic identities were more convincing to creditors, which is a key factor in its success. So you stole somebody's identity, used it to rent an apartment, and then put somebody in the apartment to live. Then he used it for fraudulent credit cards and loans. Using these synthetic and stolen identities, again, CPNs, Franklin and his co-conspirators applied for numerous credit cards and consumer loans, always with no intent to pay the debts. Once a credit card was issued, Franklin employed a, quote, bust-out strategy to maximize the cash they could draw. According to the Justice Department, he would make bogus payments on the cards, for example, initiating electronic payments or phone payments that were not backed by actual funds, such as writing phony checks or using closed accounts. The moment the payment was initiated, the bank would temporarily credit the amount and restore the card's available credit. In that brief window, before the bank realized the payment was fraudulent, Franklin and his associates would quickly run up new charges, effectively doubling the credit line in spendable funds. So by the time the bank or card issuer discovered the payment was bad, the conspirators had already maxed out the cards with purchases or cash withdrawals, leaving the lender holding the bag. So again, what they would do is they would get a card, use it, make a payment with like a prepaid card that didn't have any money on it. Then they would put that money back from the payment. So say they had a card worth $5,000. They would make a purchase, say, for $2,000. So then their available balance was $3,000, right? They would then use a fake card to pay that $2,000 back. But in the time, so as soon as they pay the $2,000 back, the card like, okay, they paid it, put that $2,000 back on there. Now they have a new $5,000 amount, and then they would use the whole $5,000 before they realized that they weren't really paying that $2,000. Crazy, diabolical. So, and then how people actually think to do this stuff too is crazy. People aren't scared enough to go to jail for me because I just could not. I'm not built for a life of crime. So during the conspiracy, Franklin personally used the fraudulently obtained credit to fund a lavish lifestyle and personal expenses. He charged tens of thousands of dollars in family expenditures to the fake credit lines. Notably, this is even more diabolical. He paid his stepdaughter's tuition and college expenses at Spelman College using the fraudulent card. Spelman is not cheap. And he covered his other daughter's orthodontics bill as well. Also, ortho braces are not cheap. He even paid for his ex-wife's dental work and cosmetic surgery with these cards. He was running up the bag. Jeez. In other words, the ill-gotten credit was being used to bankroll real-life expenses and luxury services, underscoring the audacity of the scheme. He literally was directly supporting his family with stolen credit. Now let's get into these auto loans. He just really, anything he just thought about doing, he just did it. Large consumer loans were also targeted. Co-conspirator Sabrina Wiggins Branch, 39, used synthetic identities crafted by Franklin in her own name again to finance the purchase of 2 vehicles. Like, what you need 2 for? By using a CPN paired with her name, Branch was able to take out auto loans for cars that she otherwise may not have qualified for. Again, that is illegal. Those loans, like the credit cards, were obtained under false pretenses and never meant to be repaid. And again, even if you get it like this, but you make the payments and stuff, it's still illegal because you got it by lying on the applications. So it effectively turned the cards into stolen assets from the lender's perspective. And then merchant fraud. So because credit cards are finance vehicles yield goods or credit lines, but not immediate cash, Franklin devised a way to convert credit into cash. He conspired with Branch, who owned a retail store in Wilmington's Independence Mall, to run fictitious charges through her store's credit card merchant accounts. Again, how do y'all think of this stuff? Over the course of the scheme, they processed approximately $600,000 to $650,000 in fake sales at Branch's boutique. These quote-unquote purchases were charged to the fraudulently obtained credit cards, and when the card processors transferred the funds to Branch's business account, assuming a legitimate sale had occurred, the conspirators effectively had cash in hand. They would then split the proceeds, 85% to Franklin, 15% to Branch, which, girl, if it's your business, why are you taking the lower cut? I'd be like, nah, bruh. We either doing 50-50 or I'm getting 85, you getting 15. It was your idea, but it's my business. She ain't do that right. She didn't get a big enough cut in my mind. But anyways, and withdraw the money before the inevitable chargebacks hit. Branch was careful to withdraw Franklin's share in increments under $10,000, of course, to avoid triggering currency transaction reporting requirements at the bank. This classic money laundering tactic, called structuring, helped them evade immediate scrutiny while the cash was being divvied up. So in summary, the Medicaid CPN ring operated on multiple fronts: synthetic identity creation, stolen Medicaid patient identities, credit card and loan fraud, check kiting, bogus payments, merchant fraud, and money laundering. That's a lot. The use of Medicaid recipients as data is what makes the case stand out among synthetic identity schemes, because Franklin leveraged the trust and information from his healthcare business to facilitate financial fraud. By the time authorities caught up, Franklin and his team had caused well over $1 million in losses to an array of banks, credit card companies, and auto financiers. All of it was done by impersonating either completely fictitious people or real people whose identities were hijacked. That's a lot. And we haven't even got into the legality of it yet, but just the breakdown of what they did and them getting over $1 million is CPNs are illegal. Okay. And if y'all come in my comments talking about it's not, I might respond, I might not. But let's just hear this now. I'm sending 10 tones down on the fact that CPNs are illegal, and you cannot convince me that they're not. Okay? All right. So the investigation and indictment. The fraud did not go unnoticed indefinitely. Multiple federal agencies were involved in unraveling the scheme, including the FBI, the U.S. Secret Service, the Social Security Administration's OIG, and the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation. The case was prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of North Carolina, which indicts the federal scope of the crime. Bank fraud and identity theft are federal offenses. An assistant U.S. attorney, Susan Menzer, led the prosecution and at some point referred aspects of the case to North Carolina's Medicaid Investigations Division as well, given the involvement of Medicaid patient data. A federal grand jury in Raleigh, North Carolina returned an indictment charging Sean Franklin and his 2 co-conspirators with multiple counts, chiefly conspiracy to commit bank fraud and wire fraud, among other fraud-related charges. Franklin was additionally charged with aggravated identity theft for the misuse of actual individuals' personal information. The indictment likely came in mid 2021 because the case number suggests a 2021 filing, but the dates are not concretely said or explicitly stated in sources. And Franklin was arrested and brought before the court. Notably, Franklin did not take his case to trial, which was smart. He chose to plead guilty relatively quickly, which often implies a plea deal. So let's get into the pleas. On August 5th, 2021, Sean Franklin pleaded guilty to one count of conspiracy to commit financial institution fraud, which is bank and wire fraud, and one count of aggravated identity theft. By pleading guilty, he accepted responsibility for the core of the scheme, the fraud conspiracy, and for the specific act of identity theft involving the Medicaid recipients. His co-defendants followed suit. All three conspirators entered guilty pleas by late September 2021 as part of agreements with prosecutors. In open court, they admitted the factual basis of the scheme as described earlier. But it's worth noting, I want to say that a slight discrepancy. The DOJ press release states that all three pleaded guilty on September 30th, 2021, while the state report notes Franklin's plea occurred on August 5th. So it could be possible that Franklin's deal was finalized first with the others shortly after, but we don't really, I just want to make sure I say that. But in any event, by fall 2021, the case had been resolved through pleas, avoiding a trial and moving on to the sentencing phase. So on October 20, 2022, oh, Jesus Christ. On February 28th, 2022, U.S. District Judge James C. Denver III handed down sentences to all three defendants in a combined proceeding. Sean Franklin, identified as the organizer and leader of the conspiracy, received a sentence of 126 months in federal prison, which is 10 and a half years. This severe sentence reflects not only the large financial losses, over $1 million, but also the breach of trust and the calculated nature of his fraud. It also includes a mandatory 2-year consecutive term for the aggravated identity theft count, which by law, identity theft carries a 24-month consecutive sentence, which was folded into the 126-month total. Sabrina Wiggins' branch, whose role, while important, was less central, was sentenced to 24 months in prison after pleading guilty to the fraud conspiracy, which, using your own business, you only got 24 months. I think she got off light, but that's neither here nor there. That's just little old me. And then Anthony Maryland, the least culpable of the trio, was given a notably lenient sentence, 1 day in prison, essentially time served, followed by 8 months of home detention as part of a 3-year supervised release term, which if all he did, not all he did, but considering he lived in the apartment and he knew that it was gotten from stolen information, he did need to be held accountable. I just think it's interesting that he got 1 day, but essentially time served and 8 months in home detention. It's interesting. I'm not saying if it's right or wrong. Just I don't think I've ever seen a sentence like that. And then he got 3 years supervised release term as well. Maryland's light sentence suggests he had a minor role and perhaps cooperated with investigators. Indeed, Maryland mostly benefited by living in an apartment under false identity and using fraudulent credit cards for consumer goods, and he may have provided information that helped the case. In addition to prison time, Judge Deaver ordered comprehensive financial penalties. All three defendants were held jointly and severely liable for restitution to the victims of their fraud. If I was Anthony, I would be like, I don't know. I think I might want to rather take longer prison to have less restitution. I don't know. I just don't want that amount tagged to me because I think restitution payments are 10% of your monthly income until you pay it off, I believe. I don't know. you're going to give me a light sentence, but then hold me jointly responsible for the restitution is, I don't know, I find that interesting as well. The total restitution amount was approximately $1,069,762.14. That's crazy. Reflecting the losses to various financial institutions, multiple banks and lenders that the scheme had inflicted. Notably, though, none of the restitution is to Medicaid or any healthcare entity, because again, the fraud targeted private and commercial lenders using Medicaid recipient data, not Medicaid funds. But I want to know also the people whose identities were stolen, usually having to prove that that debt isn't yours is hard. I'm hoping that because this went to trial and they were convicted, all of that was taken off of their credit reports. I'm hoping so. I couldn't find whether or not it was, but I'm really hoping that it came off. Franklin was also ordered to forfeit any proceeds from the fraud. In practice, a money judgment equal to the fraud amount was entered against him and the others, though it was unclear how much, if any, of the stolen money or purchased assets could be recovered. A $200 special assessment fee was imposed on Franklin, a similar mandatory court fee on the others. After sentencing, though, Franklin attempted to challenge aspects of his conviction and sentence. Like, my guy, just sit down and do your time. In 2023, he filed an appeal or a post-conviction motion that reached the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. The appeal may have focused on the circulation of his sentencing guidelines, for instance, disputing the intended loss amount used to determine his prison term or other legal issues. However, the Fourth Circuit did not grant him relief. In July 2024, the appellate court upheld Franklin's outcome, leaving his 126-month sentence and convictions in place. The court's decision was unpublished, indicating it found no meritorious error in the lower court's handling of the case. Neither Branch nor Maryland pursued any notable appeals, of course. Their sentences, being relatively modest and part of plea agreements, were likely accepted without contest. By 2024, Franklin remained in federal custody serving his term, with an expected release roughly in the early 2030s, while Branch had finished her 2-year term and Maryland had completed his day in custody and home confinement. So we got into marketing a little bit before, but I kind of want to backtrack just a little bit before we wrap up. So this scheme didn't do any marketing because, again, he just used information he was entrusted with. No one was directly scammed, like a Ponzi scheme or anything. However, it's worth exploring how Franklin might have recruited accomplices or marketed the use of CPNs, as well as the broader strategies people use to get people, really. So his operation was relatively, his clients really were essentially his co-conspirators and himself, because again, he didn't sell CPNs to anybody. He used them himself. But when we look at CPN fraud schemes, like on a broader level, they often rely on deceptive marketing to attract customers or co-conspirators. Companies or individuals selling CPN services typically target people with poor credit, promising a fresh start. But again, the only way to have a fresh start is to pay your debt, okay? They advertise things like start over with a new credit identity. Legally, it's not legal. Or portray the CPN as a legitimate alternative social security number for privacy reasons. Again, not the case. Franklin's scheme itself used this concept, though he didn't need to advertise it publicly since he wasn't selling to the general public. But scammers often claim CPNs are 100% legal and sometimes toss out, fake jargon to sound credible. For example, one bogus site claimed their CPN numbers are, quote, fully tri-merged with the Social Security Administration. No. Lending a false aura of government approval, which is not. In reality, the Social Security Administration does not issue or recognized CPNs. That language is pure fabrication to confuse consumers. Modern sync scams, like I said, they are just all over social media. The Better Business Bureau and law enforcement have warned that companies, quote unquote companies, selling CPNs often advertise on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Craigslist, as well as spam emails, text messages. They're all over, like I said, TikTok, Reels, all that. They will directly message people, sometimes posting in groups related to credit repair or sending DMs offering a new credit file for a fee. In some cases, they even piggyback on tax preparation season, which we're going to get into next week, advertising in communities online and even via flyers to catch people who are anxious about their finances and refunds. An example given by the BBB experts: CPN scammers have contacted potential victims through Facebook Messenger, offering to sell them a CPN and coaching them on how to use it to apply for credit. They also warn people to be wary of impromptu credit fixers or tax preparers on social media. Often those are fronts for schemes like this, like I was saying earlier. Fix your credit by yourself. Just fix it yourself. If they are telling you to use a CPN in place of your social security number, that's fraud. If they're telling you, I can fix your damaged credit, I can remove bankruptcies, I can add something to I can add something to your thin credit profile, all things that will get you denied for loans or anything, don't do it. If someone can't get an apartment due to a prior eviction or can't get a car loan due to a low credit score, they're going to come to you and be like, "Oh, I got this new secret number to wipe your clean slate." No, just don't do it. And then you have this aspect of the CPN providers will often instruct you to lie on credit applications, which again is illegal. For instance, use a CPN in place of your social security number, or provide a false address, phone number, or email so that your real credit history won't be found. Like, they will literally coach you and guide you through on how to use it. No, just no. So, in summary, while Franklin's Medicaid CPN ring didn't publicly advertise the service, it embodied the same false promises that drive many CPN scams. The idea that you can buy a new identity and leave your debts behind. The scheme likely spread through personal networks, Franklin convincing associates of the scheme's safety and profitability. In broader context, CPN marketers use social media, fake websites, and high pressure sales tactics to rope in those in financial dire straits. So, in other words, y'all, just don't do it. Just just don't. There is no way that you can buy a CPN and use it legally. If you can't get it with your own credit, just wait, build your credit up yourself, and then get it. And I know that's easier said than done if you're, if you don't have anywhere to live and you need an apartment. I understand that. I'm not trying to speak this from a position of privilege or anything like that, but we can't be doing illegal stuff to we just can't be doing illegal stuff. So, there is that. Sip or spill. I believe there was a popular influencer who recently admitted to using a CPN to rent luxury apartments and open high limit credit cards. If I'm remembering correctly, she claimed she was, quote, taking back control of her financial life. Is that empowerment or just fraud with good PR? What y'all think? I know what I think, but I want to hear what y'all think. Okay, that's the end of that episode. Again, if you're not following me on social media, I'm going to be talking about this tomorrow. It's Thursday. So we'll do a TikTok on Thursday on Black Coffee Crime Crochet. I'll probably cross post it on Instagram and Facebook as well. But also just follow me there anyway. I'm also going to post the cowl scarf, the picture of that so you can see it too. And just so I can build up my numbers, please leave 5-star reviews, 5-star ratings on Apple and Spotify. Please review me on Apple. Leave comments on Spotify. I do read them all. I do appreciate them, and it also helps other people find the show. If you want to join the Facebook discussion group, that's in the show notes, as well as if you wanted to support me more directly, Patreon is available as well. I'm going to be building out bonus episodes and things like that in Patreon coming soon. Please continue to fill out the listener survey. I have figured out how to get around bots, so this one has been doing pretty good. I still haven't gotten a lot of responses, so if you all could please fill that out for me. The link is also in the show notes. Thank y'all for allowing me to come out a day later. The semester just started back up, and yesterday was a lot. I had an in-person class that I had to do that I didn't know about. So thank y'all for giving me the grace to put an episode out a day later. It will be on time next week. But yeah, I appreciate y'all for being here another week. I will see y'all next week. I'm pretty sure I'm going to cover tax preparer frauds. Don't just let anybody who has their arms folded in a picture and a headshot prepare y'all taxes. Just don't do it. So until next week, I don't know. Just don't get a CPN. Fix your credit on your own. Okay? Bye!
Disclaimer. Great effort is made to ensure that all materials used in Black Coffee Crime and Crochet adhere to fair use guidelines. No copyright infringement is intended. If you are the copyright owner or represent the owner of any material used in this content and have concerns about its use, please contact me and I will promptly address the issue.